Hello, viewers slash listeners. Welcome back. I think you know the drill. All of you look familiar, but we'll jump right in with Martha Campbell, who's been a wonderful assistant in helping with the most recent Will Talks, and we'll let her introduce the program and our guest, and then we'll get going.
Thank you, Will. My name is Martha Campbell. I'm MFA's Communications Manager, and it's sort of my job to start the little circus that we have here. If this is your first time with us, welcome. Maryland Federation of Art is a visual arts nonprofit, and our mission is to create meaningful connections in the community through art. And one of the ways we're doing this during quarantine is to have discussions like the one we're going to have tonight. I'd like to introduce the host of our show, Will Scott. Will is an art historian with an extensive career as a photographer, and he's also the recently retired head of adult programs for the National Gallery of Art. Will is uniquely qualified to help bridge the gap between artists and the public through what we're doing tonight. Our guest tonight is Patrice Drago, an abstract painter who lives in Annapolis, Maryland. Patrice is an arts writer for the Capital Gazette and an artist at residence with Maryland Hall, and is on MFA's board of directors.
So I see all familiar faces, and you all know, and many of those others who are listening and know that I have been given the very pleasant task of choosing the artists that I'm going to talk with. And so I've had a kind of a deliberate purpose in the way that we're going in who I'm choosing, and that purpose included not inviting the best known, most prominent members of the MFA, and particularly those that serve in leadership positions as Patrice does. So we recently were talking to some people who are non-local, and I wanted to do that to sort of let everybody see the breadth and the scope of our membership as we grow as an organization. But now I wanted to turn back to people like Patrice, and I'm very excited that she agreed to do this because Patrice wears so many different hats. She's a wonderful artist. My wife and I actually are fortunate and have one of her paintings. I've known Patrice longer than any of the other people that I've interviewed so far. So we have a lot of things we could talk about, but because she's a successful artist, because she's a writer about local artists, and because she's a leader, a member of the board of the MFA, I very much wanted to talk with her and give her this opportunity to sort of, you know, explain more about who and what she is as an artist. Patrice, did you want to say anything before we jump in?
No, let's get started. I'm excited. Let's get started.
Okay, great. Well, Patrice also has a little bit of a different personal history in coming to her success as a painter. And so I want to just ask you to kind of briefly go over your evolution, experience, development, entry into the art field, but with that a strong emphasis on your long career in the corporate world for the Marriott Corporation.
Sure. Yeah, I've been doing some sort of art my whole life, and I started out with abstracts and did abstracts for a very long time. I did not go to school to be an artist. I actually chose journalism, and then I had a corporate job with Marriott, as you said, a few jobs in between, but throughout that whole time I was creating, and I spent a lot of time especially because I was on the road a lot, traveling a lot. I was working in things that were portable, like I loved for years, I did just line drawings with markers. I loved that. I still have a bunch of those. It's going way, way back now. I worked in charcoal, I worked in watercolor, I worked in gouache. Gouache was one of the things that I loved doing in college. But throughout my Marriott career, like I said, I was traveling a lot, so I always had something with me that I would do. I was taking classes throughout my career. I continued to take classes in art, even though that wasn't my, I didn't go for a degree in art. And then I came to oil painting very late, but I think it had intimidated me. First of all, it's not that portable, and secondly, it just felt like a big intimidating medium. And then I walked in and I started taking oil classes, and I said, oh my God, this is like, I'm home. I absolutely loved it. And I did that for about 10 years. And by that time, my life had changed quite a bit. Big changes. And I bought this house. I don't have a ventilated studio. And I also decided that 10 years that I was working in oil, I was working in doing representational work. Decided to go back to my roots of abstract and get back to acrylics. And by then, acrylic medium had evolved to such a degree that it's just luscious to work with. And I felt like I could achieve the same effects with acrylic that I had in oil, and we work faster and larger. And so I've been working in acrylic ever since, which is about, I don't know, 11, 12 years now. And I love it, and that and mixed media. So that's a very short story about how I got to where I am now. Throughout that whole time, I've exhibited and, like I said, took classes and continued learning. And my career at Marriott helped a lot because I had a creative career in Marriott, and I wrote. I was able to develop training programs, so it was a creative job, as well as doing my creative work on the side. So that's where I am today.
Well, great. And that's one of the reasons I thought you'd make a good interview, because you have experience speaking and organizing your thoughts and your work and being succinct as you just were. But now I want to dig into that, because that was a wonderful summary. I want to dig into it just a little bit. You mentioned how you were taking courses and you went through certain transitions in the media and the kind of approach you used in your art. Was there any person or any, like name, artist or movement, anything that had a lasting impact that you want to talk about?
When I was painting in high school, I was painting in the style of the abstract expressionists, but I had never heard of who they were because I hadn't even taken an art class at that point. So I would say that I never really developed any sort of, individuals to follow. I do love the abstract expressionists, so once I became familiar with them, I could move into an abstract expression exhibit and just live there. The New York abstract expressionists were awesome. There's a lot, Caravaggio, go take all sorts of different genres. There's just a lot of artists that I think are fantastic. And the way I learn and the way I apply what I learn is not necessarily to follow or be influenced by any one individual. It's more about taking pieces of what they do and that resonate for me and incorporating that into my work.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those happy moments as an interviewer where you know something about your interviewee and you have some anticipation, but you don't want to plan it, you don't want to script it. But you've said for me, the magic words, abstract expressionism. So Martha, could you put up the first image? And we'll talk over it when everybody can see it. Okay, great. Now, all of you who listen regularly know, and Martha mentioned it, that I have advanced degrees in the history of art. And when I first went to college and got exposed to this idea of the history of art and studying that as a academic discipline, I got very excited by abstract expressionism. Now, I'm older than Patrice, so she's exploring this in her studio and painting in this way as a younger person. I'm in college and I'm encountering it more as an academic discipline. But if a professor showed me this image at the time that I was even in graduate school and said, who could have done this? I would have said someone like one of the prominent abstract expressionists, or even some of the people who followed after and reacted against the abstract expressionists, like Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg. And I say that for two reasons. It's both the substance and the techniques, but also the approach to creating a two-dimensional image that is abstract but has recognizable components in the image. And I'm not, I don't want to try to fool anybody or falsely, I'm not trying to flatter Patrice more than I'm sincere and mean completely. But this is a very accomplished and serious work that I think you did some time ago, correct?
Yeah, 5 years ago. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you had time to absorb all of that, but that really, this image, I think, as a trained art historian, supports everything you just said about the way that you try to draw from many different sources and combine them together. This isn't an imitation of those other artists that are so much better known, but you can see those influences in here and handled in a very, very compelling and convincing way. So I have the cheat sheet. Let me just grab it.
Can I just comment on when you said Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg, I love them too. I absolutely love their work. So thank you, by the way.
You're welcome. Well, let's go on to the second image, because now it gets a little more, I think, it's not me interpreting as much as you all who are familiar with the art of the 50s and 60s can see it for yourself. And I'm not sure that I'm reading it, but right in the center, the collage elements, what's that writing in black? And did you put it there, or was that part of the image that you've collaged in?
I'm so glad you asked me about this, because this piece, I probably, of all the hundreds and hundreds of paintings I've created, this is the piece I've spent more time on than any other piece I've ever done. And I did that because I was having so much fun. I got up on a ladder, and so I had this laying down. I got up on a ladder and I would see how I would move things around. Those pieces in the center are collage items. And what took me so long was that I decided, how great would it be to have coffee and conversation with these two fantastic abstract expressionist artists. And so what I thought, well, what would I talk about? And I was reading all these articles that I had on them, and I thought one of the big things that we would talk about is, what about the women of the day? There had already been, in the last decade, there's been a lot more promotion of those women, and they were certainly equally as good as the men of that movement. And I thought, well, let me pull out some of the names. And you can't see it. I don't know if you can see it on the right, but one of the things that I have in this painting is that they changed how the world viewed art. I mean, they really did. And so all these pieces in these collage pieces are names of artists. Pollock, I can't read them now, but it's just how they could help people see art differently, because they were also so intellectual. So I had so much fun moving the pieces around and seeing how that they would work for me. And I felt like I had been living with the abstract expressionists for a month while I did this piece.
Well, that really comes through, and both in the collage elements, but in the bold, Klein-like brush strokes. Is that Joan Mitchell? Is that Mitchell?
Yes.
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 Well, this is just a little aside on my part. Jackson Pollock is justly acclaimed for his drip paintings, his action paintings, and yes, he deserves the praise that he's received, but his reputation so overshadowed his wife, Lee Krasner.
Oh, yeah.
Lee Krasner is as great a painter, in my opinion, as Jackson Pollock. And if you want to read something about her, a graduate school friend of mine, Dr. Ellen Landau, is the source I would recommend you read about Lee Krasner. Anyway, we're here to talk about Patrice Drago, so let's move along. Before we look at other images, can you say a little bit about how your writing has or has not affected your work? I mean, you stay, because you write a monthly column for the Capitol, you have to sort of stay aware of what's happening in all of the local exhibition spaces. Does that affect your work at all?
You know, it's interesting. Because to me, these are two creative endeavors that really are blended. So I can say that it's not conscious, but I believe it does. You know, I also write a blog for Visit Annapolis, it's Annapolis Discovered, I think. So I do that once a month as well, which gives me a little more opportunity to get a little bit closer to artists and art in the community. And I think that whenever you're, you know, as you know, as from academic perspective, the more you talk about something, the more you write about something, the more it kind of influences how you feel, you learn more, it just develops. And I think that it definitely does influence my art, although I can't tell you exactly, it's not like it's a direct correlation, but I feel it gives me an opportunity to step back from my own work. There's nothing more valuable than that. Like right now, I'm really missing going to museums and you know, a wide variety of galleries, because I love to see more work. So right now you know, a lot of it we're seeing online, but there's something really wonderful about being able to step away from my own work and see something completely different, because invariably I will come back and my next series, or even that painting I'm working on, will have an influence from something I've just seen. So I think, without being direct, I think there's no question that it influences me. There's so much wonderful art in the community. I mean, it is amazing. We live in such a rich area. I mean, you can't throw a stone without running into an artist, and so many accomplished artists. So I feel really lucky to have the position of being able to talk to artists and to see what's going on, to know what's going on.
Well, I feel the same way, Patrice, and I think that's one of the things that we have in common as artists. Do you have any opinion on whether the COVID crisis has put a damper on our local artists, visual artists, or do you see any inflection in the type of work that you're encountering during the COVID crisis in our local community?
You know, I really think, you know, artists are resilient. I think that what I've seen is, yes, there's been that discomfort, and I think we felt it at MFA. There's this discomfort with, how do I get my art out there? And then, you know, now, like with MFA, we're able to get more out online. I think the quality of work has not only maintained, but I see some incredibly excellent work that's been done in the last 3 or 4 months. Now, I don't know if I'm just tuning in more, and that's another thing to think about, is how we view things right now. We have a little bit more time, I think, to focus in on what we're seeing. So I've seen a lot of really thoughtful work, and of course the social issues are driving a lot of art. Right.
Do you want to call out any of our local artists by name? I mean, this is not the kind of thing I've asked the other artists, because you have this position as a writer and an observer as well as a participant. So I completely understand if you don't want to do that at this moment, but is there anyone?
You know, I can't single anybody out. Like I said, we have so many, and I have so many artist friends and colleagues that I admire. So honestly, I don't think I can pick one out. I think that what I would say is that if there's an opportunity to see an exhibit right now, see it. I think the work that's been coming into MFA has been fantastic. Yeah, unfortunately, Will, I don't think I can call one out. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Yeah, I think even if you could, I would understand if you were reticent, given the role that you play as a writer, and you know, that hat might make you not want to do that. So, but thanks for answering the way you did. Before we go on and look at some more of your work, which is, I think, to me, very, very interesting, and I want to do that before we take questions. Can you just say a little bit about why you've given so much time and energy to the MFA as a member of the board and in other roles? I think that's, for the other artists that I've interviewed, it's been more, why did you decide to join? But again, your relationship to the organization is different. You're the first board member that I've interviewed. So you want to say anything about that?
Sure. You know, I am such a huge fan of MFA, and I have to say this, so this is the absolute truth. I'm not really a group person. I'm kind of a larger, large bank person. Excuse me. Uh-oh, I'm going to take a glass of water. I'm not usually a small group person, and this course is not a small group, but I tend to like float from place to place and you know, contribute and gain and do that sort of thing. But MFA is such a different animal, and I love it. I love it because it gives artists, it's friendly, first of all, than it has been for, you know, well, when I first started in 2002, I was a member, and it was great, and it was, you know, it was a good organization. I left for a while and came back, and it seemed like all of a sudden it was really moving into overdrive. And, you know, it's very easy. It was very easy for me to get to know the board members and Joanne Vaughn, the executive director, who's fantastic. And once you get to know them, part of it is that it helps you in your art, right? So it was helping me, it was fueling me. No matter what, when you're involved in an art organization that is embracing and wants to get everybody's art out into the world, it fuels what you do. So it's energizing. And I felt that. And then so I was asked to be on the board, and I have to say this is the truth. I would never, I've been on a couple of boards, and for me, being on a board is not about being on a board. It's about doing something that I could, you know, working with an organization that I can actually contribute, and I think that it's doing something that's really fulfilling its mission. And that's why I'm on the board of MFA. Because if I didn't like it, I would get off. If I thought it was just one of those boards where you go and you have a meeting once a year or once every other month, and you just sat there and listened and said, yeah, no, whatever, I couldn't do it. We are a working board, and it makes me feel really good because I think we do such great things with the exhibits that we, you know, we're exposing the community to such wonderful art, and it really, members do benefit so greatly from it. So that's the truth. That's how I feel, and I will continue to do it as long as I can.
Well, I really appreciate that. As a fellow board member, I think you said that all very well. And now I'd like to take advantage of the situation that we're in at the moment. Part of my portfolio is to find new board members. So with those encouraging remarks and that statement from Patrice, if anybody listening is interested, please contact me. And I would be happy to talk with you because we always are looking for new good additions to our board. Now let's go back to your work and spend our next 10 minutes or so until we take Q&A. And I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about what you're doing now and where you think you might be going with your work in the next months or even years. So Martha, if we could have the next image. Now, all of these that we're looking at, Patrice, are fairly recent, within the last few years. Am I correct?
Well, the first two that we just did were from 2015. Okay. This is this year.
Okay. Well, I mean, as an aficionado of abstract expressionism and as a trained historian of American art, this actually looks more abstract expressionist than many of the things I've seen you do recently. You want to tell me and the rest of us why?
You know, it's hard for me to say why I go off in a certain direction, but what I have been noticing, you know, for a while, you know, this last decade, I did a lot of abstractions from nature. I did a lot of abstract trees, things that were somewhat recognizable. As you know, you don't really have to say, oh, that's an abstracted landscape, because you can sort of see it. Yep. But I have really gotten to the point where when that starts to happen in my painting, I start to cover it up. I don't want to do that. I just feel the need for a completely, just to do something completely conceptual. And, you know, I've finally finally understand why so many abstract artists use the term untitled for each piece. Practical, because it's really hard to say, well, I like the one that's called Untitled. Well, if you've got 12 untitled pieces, then that's not practical. But I get it, because I don't want to guide people to what I think that they should see. I want people to see what they see. So this really is just completely intuitive. And again, like I said, if it starts to look like anything recognizable, I will go back and cover it over.
Well, that's great, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. But when I looked at this image, which I saw for the first time yesterday, I think, when you sent me some slides to look at, this has, to me, a great cohesiveness among the various parts of the image, the lines, the shapes, the colors. How important is that to you as an artist, and how deliberate is the creation of that kind of cohesiveness in this work or works that you're doing like it?
No matter what work I do, composition is king. So it absolutely, it's important to me where all those pieces are. And it's step back and look at it and say, what's missing, what isn't. I'm not a big fan of just rambling, just throwing paint on and letting it go. So composition is king. So even though some of my very large pieces that are action really paintings, because I just really go at it and very physical, are still guided by the elements that I put in there. So it's always line and there's always a shape. And for me, where it sits on there is so important, because if one thing's out of place for me, I can't live with it.
Do you mean, when you say you can't live with it, do you wake up in the middle of the night and think that's just not right, and I've got an idea and I've got to go and do something now?
Oh yeah, I've done that so many times. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I think painters and sculptors, drafts people have that much more than at least I do as a photographer, because I know that it's there and I know what I can do when I get up in the morning. I'm not going to get up in the middle of the night. But I've heard so many painters and sculptors say that kind of thing. So let's look at the next image. Now, how is that related chronologically to what was just on the screen first? Simple question.
This was last year.
Last year, okay.
Summer.
So
6 months, 7 months different.
So why the change to the image that was just previously on the screen, which I see as much more solid, with greater structure and intentionality? At least that's the way I'm reading it. That may be completely wrong. Why?
You mean the other one had more intention?
Yes, and more structure.
Right. There is this thing that I am influenced by, and it is water, and it is the color blue. And so there are times, I go through, the colors that you just saw in the previous painting, the grays and the yellows, I do a lot of those in my urban work, because I do still love doing urban abstractions, because I love the contradiction between that and the natural world, all those lines. And so I love those colors. But I will do a whole series of those, and I have to come back to my blue. It's very soothing. And so this, again, another intuitive painting, this is all about the feeling I get when I think about summer and water. And when I put blue, any kind of the blues that I work with down on the palette and on the canvas, I just let them tell me what they want to do.
Yeah, that all resonates with me. The painting by Patrice that my wife and I own is mostly blue, and blue, at least for me, blue is a color that I'm very drawn to. So thank you. Let's move on again, Martha. Now, I'll just say before I say anything else that Patrice, if somebody were to stop me on the street and say, do you know Patrice Drago's work? This is the kind of image that I would think of. So can you kind of root that for our viewers, listeners, in time and place in your career?
I'm trying to think. So much has happened in the last 12 months. I can't honestly keep things straight. I think this is early last year. This one is early last year, or might have been the end of 2018. So that's what you want to know, is when I did it?
Yes, but only because I could not, doing the art historian thing, I couldn't place that in the images that I'm familiar with, and particularly the ones we've just been talking about. If I were given that, assignment, write a catalog raisonné of Patrice Drago's work and, fit all these things into the proper chronology, which isn't necessarily that important in the end, but that's what art historians do, as most of you know. So do you think that the differences that I see formally, because this is not exactly like either of the other two, are because of the things that have been happening around you in the world in your personal life? Or is it just purely the product of what's happening in your studio and the way you're just working on a given day? Or does it mean anything larger than that?
I don't know. I think, of course, there's no question that we are, whether we realize it or not, are influenced by what's going on in our life. This painting I did with that whole coastal series. That's all the aquas. I have two of them sitting behind me. This to me feels very much in the same vein as the one with the gray and the yellow, because it's so much line.
Yeah.
And it's a rather minimalist with some white in it. And I'm leaning more these days towards adding more white into my paintings. I love color, but I'm leaning towards adding white. I think that this was about summer and minimalism. And I just, I thought I was going to do more with this, and I stepped back and I just said, no, I really like it the way it is, and I don't want to do anything more with it. This whole series, I had done a lot of that series was very active, and then I finished it off with this one, and it was a really nice way of kind of getting down to more quiet. If that makes sense.
Yeah. To me, it's also, it's full of space. It's not just light, but it's full of space. Mm-hmm. Is that just me, or would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And that's my way of, like I said, getting down to the quiet means leaving space so you can breathe. It was more of a breathable type of experience. Okay,
let's just go through the rest of them. I think we have 3 more pretty quickly. And if you want to comment specifically on one of these, then you do so.
Okay.
If you want to.
These little guys, I'm loving doing these because they're 8 by 8 and they're on that birch panel. It's a primed gesso. This is my, it's kind of like being in a candy store, because I get to make all those marks I like and, play with the different shapes and the different textures. So I've done 4 of them and I absolutely love doing them. So these are recent. This is also this year.
Would you be offended or put off if I said it looks like fun?
It absolutely is fun, and I'm glad you find that, because that's the goal.
Yeah. We'll talk later.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. This is the last one. Where does this fit chronologically? Is this something that type of thing you're doing right now?
Last week.
Okay.
And truth time, it may not be done. Somebody takes that painting out of my hands, it's really fair game for me to go back and do something. The other thing I will say about this is it's hard to capture the right color, so that periwinkle looks a little bit more fluorescent than it really does in real life. But I've been working on this for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Well, I think you have something to work with there, and I'll be anxious to see it when it is quote unquote finished. Okay, well, Patrice, it's been really a lot of fun to talk with you. about your work and get to see some of the things you're doing right now that I wasn't aware you were working on. But now it's time. We talked a little longer than I have with some of the other guests. So let's go ahead. We try to keep to an hour. Let's go ahead and open it up for questions. If you have a question, wave. Or Martha, would you explain the other ways that people can interact with us?
You can either wave. There is also a chat function for Zoom. You're welcome to type out your question if you don't want to physically say it. And then also in the very bottom of your screen, there should be a tab that's called reactions. And there's some emojis in there that you can pick one of those and we'll get to you.
All right, thank you. So let's go. I can't tell if Rooster, I don't see everybody even now, but somebody whose screen name is Rooster, I can't tell if you're raising your hand or not. Martha, that person needs to be unmuted.
I was about to raise my hand. I live under this name of Rooster. My partner used my iPad and we haven't been able to figure out how to get his college nickname off. I'm lost. Anyway, so I can say anything. Hello, Patrice. I just recently met you at the Gallery B opening. And I'm interested in your work. I enjoyed meeting you. And unfortunately, I missed the first half hour, I would say, of your presentation today. I'm interested in the kind of evolution of your minimalism. And I don't know if it really is evolving or not, but it seems to me from the very few works, starting with the yellow and gray, that I've seen that it is an evolving vision. And I'm interested in learning about how other people see things. So can you talk about that?
Sure.
I'd understand if you can't.
No, I definitely, because minimalism is something, so I don't know if any of you have seen different tracks of my work, but I do a number of different things. And I don't think that that's a lack of focus for me. It's really about applying what I know into doing the different things that inspire me. So I go down different tracks. And minimalism has been something that I, way back, high school, loved it. And you know, and in my drawings, I'm so drawn to mid-century modern. I love the minimalism of it. And so for me, my creative flow is really up and down. It's like it's a cycle that I get into this mode where I'm just really wanting to do color and craziness and fill the canvas, and then I go into another mode where I really want to do this minimalism. So I do, right now, I'm working on a series of square line drawings that I'm going to have copy printed by a printer, and I'm going to hand paint them, so they'll be hand signed print in minimalist fashion. So for me, it's kind of like that last painting that we looked at, and there's a space. I feel like I always need, and I think people always need, a place to breathe. So that's why I keep getting drawn to it. Now it could be evolving in a different way, but it's something that I keep going back to. Does that answer your question? Are you muted?
Hi, it's interesting to me what you said, and I'm interested in your upcoming project. I think people need to breathe, and I think people need to learn to play with the visual imagery that we provide. So maybe that's part of what you're working on. And thank you for this opportunity. I'll give you an email. I'll give you a ring, as we say. Bye.
Bye. Martha, it looks like a couple of people have commented in the chat. Were any of those questions?
Yes, we have a question from Linda, who asks, how has your talent as an accomplished pianist affected your art?
Hi, Linda, my piano teacher, Linda Paez, is on board. How has it affected my art? You know, that is such an interesting question. My parents were musicians, and I grew up thinking that I was going to be a musician. That's really what I thought, and so that's another really long story. I think that creative. Whenever I'm doing anything, I mean, music is just another form of creation, and I miss it, Linda. I miss playing piano. You're muted.
I miss you too. I hope you're playing.
Every now and then.
Well, that's spoken like a piano teacher. Keep up your lessons. Keep up the practice.
We
Martha?
also have a question from Chuck A, who says, when I tilt my screen back, I see a lot of details and subtle colors. Straight on, this disappears. So large white patches have more depth and colors when tilted back. Which view provides the correct representation of your art? And I imagine this is a question, if Chuck, you'd like to say more about maybe the way it's displaying online. But Patrice, maybe you can say something about seeing it in person from different angles.
Is that the last piece that is that what you're asking, Chuck? The last piece?
It's actually, it seems all of them. I noticed it when I stepped way back from the screen, and just like any image, often you can see much more when you step back.
Mm-hmm.
When I stepped back, all of a sudden a lot more colors started showing up. And I thought, what's going on here? So then I tilted the screen each way and realized there was all this detail. And so I'm trying to figure out, is there really that detail? Or I can't remember which image I first noticed on it, but it was probably 3 or 4 back from the end.
Okay.
And the one you were talking about with the blue, you said you really like blue. When that one was, I think, very white, a lot of white. And when I tilted it back, there was a lot more detail in there. So which is...
Yeah, you're right about that one, Chuck. That one in particular, in fact, most of my paintings, other than like that last one, channeling with all that white space and the line, the one that you're talking about called Undertow, most of my paintings have many layers. And so while you're looking at white on the screen, there is a lot more going on when you see it in person. So that's one of the things that, if you're thinking about branding, and if you're putting your work on the website, you should always have a website presence, right? When you want to put your work on the website, one way to show what a painting actually looks like is showing it in a different perspective. It's really hard. All of these paintings, everything that we show online, really, it's not the same as seeing in person. But those that have subtle undertones and other things going on, if you show it, if you take a picture of it from an angle, you get more of an idea of what it looks like. So you were right, and you saw a lot more detail. It's there.
It does. I do know from a professional photographer friend of mine that to get an image of a painting requires really special lighting that we typically don't have at our fingertips. Polarized light sources and things. Otherwise, you get this washed out view, or it gets flat, etc. So it's a tough thing to take an image with a camera, certainly with a phone camera.
I find my best ones are with my phone. I've given up on my camera. The best ones are with my iPhone, gotta say.
I want to just jump in before we take the next question. I think that's interesting as a photographer and as an art historian, and more as an art historian, struggling with it, as a graduate student and teaching and using slides. The worst thing about a camera, most cameras, is that mixed light, that is light from multiple sources. Every light source has its own temperature, and it's part of what makes photography of works of art difficult. If you have that mixed light, the questioner mentioned polarized light, that's another thing. And raking light. If you don't have raking light across the painting surface, you're not really seeing the vitality and the liveliness of the surface itself. I see David Diaz is here. It must really affect his work because he's a very painterly artist. So is Patrice, but in a different way. So yeah, that's a terrific point. And I'm not surprised that, Patrice, you like your phone pictures, because the software in a phone it's my understanding it's intended to kind of even everything out. You know, so the cameras I use are meant to try and capture everything, but it makes it harder for you to actually do that.
Right.
Mike Teams?
Mike,
Unmuted. As I listen to this, I'm an engineer, and I think the problem that Chuck is having is with his display much rather than your art, because as he looks at it from a different direction with his on his screen, that's a characteristic of a not very new display. And you can buy new displays. I have a couple of new ones that are called IPS displays that you see the same thing from every angle. And I've got a laptop that if I look at it from a different angle, I see different things. And that sounds like what he's experiencing.
Thanks, Mike. I think that's a great observation. Thank you. Okay, some of the other people maybe that are working through the chat that we want to get in here, Martha?
No more in the chat, but Chris Fowler just raised his hand.
Okay, great.
Chris, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Patrice. I'll just mention in passing that the first time I walked into the Circle Gallery, it was Joanne and Patrice who were there. So you're the one that I've known longer than anybody practically in the MFA. So you probably are aware of the same quote that I am, that Robert Motherwell said, that he didn't do paintings in series, and if he ever got an elegy right, he would stop. I'm wondering, is there a through line in all of your work that you can discern, or is it exactly the opposite, that you find yourself pulled in different directions and in fact resist the idea of your art becoming formulaic, I guess I would say, if that's the right word?
Yes, Chris, that's a great question. Thank you. I always go with where my heart tells me to go. And, with my head thrown in there too, I marry the two, but I don't do continued series. I don't follow down a singular path just because I can't. It just won't let me. I like to continue to evolve. For me, changing and evolving is what life is all about. I always have to have something new to look forward to. So when I will do, this probably the most cohesive series I ever did was the Coastal series. I like to expend that energy and then move on to something else. So I really like to continuously try new things and go down the path that inspiration takes me. And I have to go with that. When, I've had people ask me to please do your sailboats, do your animals. And I always will do my little animals because I love them. I think that, animals provide such magic in the world, and I love bringing out the humor in them. But I can't do them exclusively. I have to do a lot of different things. So does that answer your question, Chris?
Sort of. I was thinking, you say you go where your heart leads you. Do you know the sort of thing that your heart leads you towards? For lack of a better term, do you know your own voice, and what is it?
Yes, you know what? I would say this, that everything I do, there is a constant, and that constant is joy and optimism. So that can take many forms, and it can look in many different ways, but that's always where I am led. So, Will had asked a question earlier, and I think it's even more, now that I think about it, it's really true, is that everything that happens to me in my life does influence me. So when wherever I am, at any given moment, when I see this spark of optimism, it might look differently than the last painting I did, but that's the direction I'm going to go in. So it's always, my voice is always to find ways of creating something that is uplifting, to me at least. It's not just about being content with the process. For me, it's about joy. And having that come through on the canvas. And if I don't, then it's not a successful painting and you will never see it. But that is my process. That's where I'm coming from, and it's where I want to go to.
Chris, I think that was a great question and a very interesting answer from Patrice. And I would just throw into the mix as an art historian. I think all of us, at least all of you who I know well enough to say that I think this, you might agree, we're accustomed to thinking about artists' careers because of the way that art historians and museum curators present artists' careers to us in books and retrospective shows. And remember that one of the things an art historian or a curator is trained to do is to sort of make sense out of the artist's body of work. So whole big sections can be weeded out because that person thinks it's not good enough, it's not important enough, or what Patrice is saying, what she just said very well, I think is what motivates any artist that's not working to a market. If your main goal as an artist is to sell, make money, pay the rent, you're going to follow, well, this sold, this was successful, I'm going to make more of it. You may not be wholly governed by that, but it's a mistake to think that an artist just moves from point A to point B to point C. That's the product of the museum and gallery world and academia. Anyway, we've had, I think, a wonderful discussion, and as well as I do know Patrice, I learned a lot, and I think you've made a wonderful guest, and I hope everybody else has enjoyed it, but we have run out of our hour, and I hope you'll all be back in 2 weeks. I don't know who I'm going to talk to in 2 weeks. I haven't decided yet, but you'll know in plenty of time, and I hope you'll join us. So
I want to thank everybody too. It's been great. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad to continue conversations with anybody moving forward. So
terrific. All right. Thanks all. Enjoy the rest of your evening.